Until a few years ago, Alexander Hamilton was hardly a household name among America's founding fathers. He wasn't a president. His face is on the $10 bill that many people don't examine closely. And frankly, for over 2 centuries, he just was the least famous and underrated founder. But if you dive into his story, you'll notice it has everything: ambition, war, revolution, scandals, and finally a deadly duel. In fact, Hamilton was such a powerful figure in the early United States that he very well might have become the fourth US president if he hadn't been killed in a duel by the sitting vice president. Now, over 220 years after, Hamilton's name is everywhere, thanks largely to a Broadway musical. And all of a sudden, songs were being sang about the first US Treasury Secretary in the White House and in classrooms. And one of the recurring questions in the musical is who lives, who dies, who tells your story. It's kind of a powerful reminder that the way or the person who tells your story plays a significant role in how the history sees you. Just like Hamilton, people didn't know him very well. And he was just this guy that was the founding father, one of the founding fathers. However, after the musical, everyone was like, wow. The image people have of him today is very different from how he was seen when he was alive. History has a way of highlighting some parts of someone's life and completely ignoring the other part. And sometimes it takes a new storyteller to repaint that picture. So let's tell Hamilton's story. Because no matter how you look at it, his life was epic and tragic, which is a good recipe for a great story. This is a man who rose from nothing, built the foundations of the American economy and government, fell from grace in a sex scandal, and died in one of the most famous duels in history. Who was Alexander Hamilton? How did he envision America's future? And what led to that deadly duel? Let's dive in step by step into the extraordinary life of Alexander Hamilton. How does the story of Alexander Hamilton begin? Not in the 13 American colonies, but on a small Caribbean island, far from the halls of power. If you listen to the Hamilton's musical soundtrack, you might have recalled the provocative opening lines.
How does a bastard, orphan, son of a whore and a Scotsman...
A harsh description of Hamilton's origins. Just make something clear. Hamilton was born out of wedlock and he grew up fatherless. However, it's very unfair to call his mother a The truth is, his mom, Rachel, was actually a very strong and independent woman who had just lived an abusive marriage and could never officially divorce. It's just that her husband refused. She then lived with James Hamilton, which Alexander's father, and had 2 sons because she wasn't legally divorced. Society considers her sons to be legitimate. Okay, enough with that, and now let's start Hamilton's timeline. Hamilton was born around 1755 or 1757. Historians are actually not sure about this, but what they are sure about is the fact that he was born on the island of Nevis, and life wasn't easy there. His father, James Hamilton, abandoned the family when Alexander was just a child, and when baby Alexander was around 12 or 13, his mom dies, leaving him an orphan with basically nothing. Alex and his older brother found work where they could. Alex became a clerk for this local trading company in St. Croix, which was another island in the Caribbean. And working there, he proved to be remarkably smart and diligent. Imagine a teenager managing shipping records for sugar, rum, and slave trade goods on a little Caribbean island. That was Hamilton's reality. The Caribbeans of the 1700s wasn't a postcard paradise. It was the harsh world of colonial plantations. From early on, Hamilton had 3 traits that would define him as a man and will build his legacy on those 3 traits. First of which is ambition. He was super ambitious. The second one is he was always hungry for knowledge. He read all the books he can get his hands on. The third one, which might not surprise you because Hamilton is that he was an exceptional writer, and he wrote and wrote and wrote without stopping. We'll see in a bit where that comes handy. Anyway, working for that trading company, he gained access to the owner's small library and devoured books on history, economics, and whatever else he found. And he practiced writing letters, essays, descriptions, building skill that will later make him famous. And as a side note, if you think about it and actually pay attention, all the great historical figures were great writers. I believe that writing makes you sort your thoughts and help you think better. So if you never considered journaling or writing down your daily thoughts, I really recommend it. I've been recently getting into that, and I find that my mind's a mess. Anyway, don't rely too much on AI and try to write things yourself. Let's continue. Now it's 1772, and it comes Hamilton's big break. When Hamilton was around 17, we're not sure about that, a massive hurricane hits the island of St. Croix, and it was a disaster. Homes destroyed, lives upended, and Alexander Hamilton writes a vivid, dramatic letter describing the hurricane's destruction. He wrote it as if it were a report or an article for the local newspaper. His description was so striking and eloquent that when the letter got published, the local committee took notice. People were asking, who in the world write this? And soon they will realize the author is the son of a sailor, Alexander Hamilton. The island leaders were so impressed that they gathered money from local people to send him to the 13 colonies to North America to start studying, to just not waste his life over there. This is fascinating to me. Wow. People were something back in the day. And nowadays, people just pay taxes and hate what government does. Anyway, so the locals were, hey, Hamilton, we have this money for you. If you take the money and go study at this university in New York called King's College, which is basically the Columbia University right now, we will give it to you and you can study and you can save yourself from this horrible, horrible island in the middle of nowhere. And he jumped on the opportunity and took the first ship, went to New York. Now picture this. A penniless teenage immigrant arriving in New York City. He has to be one of the ultimate underdog stories of all time. But he had two things going on for him. A sharp mind and a relentless drive. Anyway, he's at New York the moment when the whole continent is about to ignite. It's the early 1770s. And the tension between American colonies and the Britain is sky high. As high as it can get. Without a war. Young Hamilton steps into a world buzzing with revolutionary talk. Protests in the streets, pamphlets being distributed in pubs, passionate debates in the classroom. This was the world Hamilton walked into. And he was like, what the? So at this stage, the 13 American colonies were chafing under British rule. Britain was imposing new taxes every day, like the Stamp Act and the Tea Act, and tightening control. And many colonists were fed up with taxation without representation. Each colony had local leaders discussing what to do, and a Continental Congress was formed to present a united front to Britain. And at first, these American leaders didn't want full independence. They wanted autonomy and fair treatment as British subjects. But as a petition to the king failed and British crackdowns increased, the idea of outright independence kind of sparked from there. Hamilton, the student, found himself in the thick of this ferment, and he was just 18. But he had a writer's pen and a patriot's heart, while he was only an immigrant. He starts writing essays and pamphlets, first anonymously. And get this, in one of the published pieces defending the American colonies, Hamilton's writing was so good that everybody was thinking this writing must be coming from someone who's old, wise, and it couldn't be just a teenage boy. There were talks about it. And when it turned out that Hamilton, when he was 18, wrote them, everyone was just in disbelief. The kid was good. And what kind of things he was writing? He was writing Enlightenment things. He was really influenced by the Enlightenment ideas of the time. Thinkers like John Locke, who said government should be by consent of the governed, or that all men have natural rights. And Hamilton wrote, "Why should an island rule a continent? For we won't be free if we let a king across the ocean make all our decisions." He hadn't fully called for independence yet in his early writings, but he was definitely fanning the flames. By 1775, the conflict went violent. The first shots of American Revolution were fired. America was in open rebellion. Hamilton didn't sit on the sidelines. He joined a local New York militia unit. Remember, he was educated and came from an island background, but he was determined to prove himself on the battlefield as well. In fact, around this time, Hamilton wrote to a friend, "I wish there was a war." He literally wished for a war to gain a chance to prove himself, to climb the ladder. Because, as we know, chaos is a ladder. It sounds crazy, but for ambitious young men in that era, military glory was one of the greatest paths to fame. And Hamilton got his wish. The war offered him the opportunity to shine, though perhaps not in the way he initially imagined. He fought bravely in some early battles around New York City and caught the attention of his senior officer. Before long, word of his smart, brave artillery captain reached the ears of none other than General George Washington.